Original sin.
The sin causing the sins is more fundamental than the capital sins, those that kill, and last since the beginning of mankind itself. The original sin which gives rise to all the others mentioned in the previous chapter, and all the others which have not been mentioned act on civilization since its foundations. Let's go back at the story of the Genesis and other prevalent themes of the Middle Age and Antiquity. Not to defend their veracity nor humiliate them, but rather to use the eloquent relation to do with these subjects and the consequences that we face since by our breaches of them. So as demonstrated before, it is apparently difficult to believe that copulation between animals could be a sin in itself, and without detour, let's move forward towards the gravity of the acts of violence towards animals. This is a real sin of the flesh. One may wonder perhaps what is it to do with violence against animals? See how we train and empower real assassins without much reserve, either by dedicating them to the task of execute beasts or by suggestive ideas in weak minds, that these violent acts could also be acceptable or applicable on humans through many means. If a man can kill docile and diligent horses, how much easier could he execute an arrogant or even just a very upright stranger? What happens once again of the personal ethics of these other witnesses on the journey who see or only imagine these killings? What about the social climate that these doubts led hovering in morals? Is it not easy to presume that the climate is brought much more austere? Is it not easy to see that the rigor of the times may have much to do with these daily genocides? This kind of observation will perhaps give us the desire to make poorly affectionate prayers, crying and supplications that an unimaginable number of animals do every day without being heard. Exaggerations? Thousands of years elapsed before we become aware of this infamy without protesting. Living beings have many organs that regulate their entire system, including a wide range of physical maneuvers of any forms. Better than the best clock can regulate only time. The difference between man and woman would be complementary for the sole purpose of tempting Beelzebub? Really? We still believe that? Are we all to wait for the Archangel Gabriel to ensure our descendants? Then we would have good reasons to finally love each other, having put many young Jesus to life. In the world of perfect chastity, men would work and play together without crossing women. They would do the same on their side. So as soon as a witch would glimpse at a young male, she would become perfectly alert from the fact that all of her organs would claim him. Her or him would be excommunicated with a desirable excommunicated of the other clan. Thus would arise a parallel society in greater harmony with its sexuality and the bipolarity of its genders. If we are to judge by the statistics, one have not long calculation to determine which society would be the more prosperous. There is only one to be born without human fertilization on hundreds of billions of births that have taken courses. The sadistic, narcissistic, masochistic, exhibitionist, oppressive, idolatrous, false, hypocritical and materialistic inclinations of the cloistered camp would make them a sect more than a church. These chaste individuals could eat all the corpses of animals that they would like, at least they would be chaste. Of a perfectly chaste society, we sprouted a future perfectly sinful society, in the image of our so-called civilization. Let's proceed in reverse. Let's take the other society, where the sin of flesh is to kill and is consistent with one of the famous 10 Commandments. So let's found a vegan society rather than chaste, or if one prefer, loving rather than cruel, original sin. Not eating meat, there would be a guaranteed tendency of reducing the effect of hierarchization, in comparison with our society. This, because of the lessened fear of the other who's, by the average effect, softer-hearted. However, this vegan social climate of non-violence would cause a less malicious trend associated with a spirit of communication and openness more equitable and conducive to friendship and harmonious realizations, which would result in a less indifferent to one another. People, being less under the oppressive yoke of indifference, would be less inclined to segregation. Man is a naturally social being. His full development arises from it. Segregation therefore is an opposite direction to his nature and therefore is prejudicial to him. In a vegan society, he would be less victim of indifference and of the frustration that this entails. Not having the habit of aggressing animals daily, he would be less inclined to imagine sordid solutions, to arm himself to address his problems. Suicide or murder are solutions to all types of problems. With our habit to kill animals, it is the first solution we imagine facing a problem. Hence arise our excesses of anger, our violence and our impatience, but also our insecurity, our enslavement, our lack of integrity, our lies and stress. But, in a vegan ideal, having warm relationship with his community, each would be less inclined to cheat a friend through adultery. He would have no reason to dream about things other than the happiness of his community and his family and would avoid idolatry. He would draw on his integrity and frankness, the source of information to the issues and problems that he comes with. His society would be more united, more attentive and a better advisor. Why break such portrait of social harmony subsequently through vanity? Is our society, which spreads out chunks of meat as red as possible in the eyes of the children, to let them know that it is really blood that has been shed, a sweet and evolved society? When our children injure themselves, they bleed and cry as a result. What do they think when they see meat slices exposed on a giant, extremely well-enlightened wall, recognizing the red?
Greek mythology.
There are many very ancient legends which underline the controversy here presented. Melchizedek had taught the offering of bread and wine to Abraham centuries before Jesus. Even the vegetarian Zoroaster, who had prophesied the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem and his crucifixion by the Jews, had best kept the memory of Melchizedek and predicts the consequences of this rejection. But one of the most surprising legends is that of the Minotaur. The Minotaur was a monster with a human body and a bull's head. King Minos locked it in a maze and was delivering its 7 children of Athens every year to feed it. Thesis: the king of Athens killed the monster. Other historical accounts of this kind, of ancient Jewish tradition, relate in many accounts to the Greek cult. At several times, the Canaanites sacrificed children to Moloch, Melech, and Yahweh was furiously outraged. The decline of the Jewish empire that David bequeathed to Solomon has followed this same perversion. On the psychological level, the myth of the Minotaur suggests that if we eat beef except for its head, this head feeds on the souls of our children. If it appears futile that eating meat is a sin of the flesh, ask ourselves now what could be worse and continue our mystical quest in our mazes of shelves of all kinds. How to get out? How to live? Devoted our expensive dime, our alms, to our butchers. Then go to our blood-filed pallet to recite there our hymns of worship or our mute mantras.
So good.
Implore the Creator, as number of livestock promoted at the slaughterhouse. He will free us in peaceful meadows. Then we will learn to love the vegetal that we will ruminate several times. Savoring it, we will tell ourselves, we will graze so less than a year, until we are found very juicy, almost as much as a blood orange. Then, one will delight of our desperate flesh faithful to find hope and vitality in it. They will still say in a just as much unworthy spirit of linguistic proficiency, so good, but, between those times of delight, it is rather our frightened queries, like all the other tearful Hansel and Gretel's prayers that the infernal oven of a harridan will muffle infinitely. If the meat is a delicacy, we haven't seen anything yet. The ploy of sacrificial worship is simple. It exploits the intimidation of a deliberate and pointless cruelty that is put in honor by the public murder of an invariably innocent animal victim, that are said carried out for some divinity. Sure intimidation that guarantees social enslavement. The executioner's assurance guarantees cultural and economic submission of the citizen. These barbarous rites still exist in impressive numbers for the same purpose in the 21st century. One day, we will be all vegan, regardless of what we think of them. This is an unavoidable decree, because cruelty is the original sin of all sins, and cruelty to animals, the sin of the flesh, is where it originates. Eating meat seems not even to be a sin, and a large number falsely believes that it is a need, or even a privilege. But out of this minor sin arise the worst of sins, that is cruelty. So it means that the sinner by cruelty decides the vital fate of another being. From that arise all man-made structures of the hierarchies of men, oppression from which pour many other calamities. But of course we are not so easily convinced.